most you can say about me finishes in about 3 minutes. But I was quite nervous coming here because I'm a bit of a misfit in a gathering of to-be managers. In journalism, we don't polish shoes, we don't do PowerPoints. I don't know how to run this. And so I'm not even going to attempt it. I have, in my career in sports broadcasting, worked with an enormous number of people such as, not as eloquent as Harish, but a lot of people who've given you a window into how this business works. But we are outsiders. Well, in a sense, we are cannibals. We look to exploit the business. We sit on the outside, especially in the news business, and we look to see how that business offers us a delivery platform, which is, well, at times contentious, at times spicy, at times material that gets us an enormous amount of backlash. I'm sure Mr. Somariwala here believes that among the major culprits for the lack of support to athletics in India is the news medium, and I think we are guilty as charged to a large extent. However, I don't want to necessarily talk too much, also because I'm in the business of interrupting. If any of you do feel the urge to do so while I'm talking and I have a question, please go right ahead. It's good to be on the other side of a session of this kind. I wanted just to briefly reflect on the IPL. Everyone's spoken here about it and presented it as this model of success, which almost seems to be the prototype for, well, how sporting properties should in the future look at themselves, how they should position themselves, how perhaps a sport needs to look at its growth. But just look back at 2008. The IPL is probably the biggest risk in the history of Indian sport, perhaps among the biggest in the history of world sport. Why is that? Here comes the IPL in 2008 in the middle of a jam-packed cricket calendar, in the middle of an audience which consumes only international cricket, which over its 100-year, 150-year history has shown us no evidence of any interest in anything other than international cricket. Why is that? That somebody feels that there is, well, an idea here that can be developed. What do? They appeal to the sensibility of a cricket fan for the first time as a non-Indian, a non-Australian, a non-Englishman, a non-South African. For the first time, a property appeals to you to become an audience which relates to its city, which could at one time conceivably in the future be, the Ranchi Rambos or whatever. There is suddenly a new property out there. It doesn't come off just because it is somebody's idea. It comes off because it's a brilliantly executed idea. And that's the lesson which everybody in sport will have to look at. Not look at from the point of view of achieving the scales that the IPL has, but what is sport in the modern era? Sport in the modern era is really entertainment on television. Not in the sense that a lot of us see entertainment in television. Entertainment on television is your Saas Bahu serials, is your movies. Sport is unscripted theatre, drama, which needs to be delivered to a television audience which is out there willing to consume it. Mr. Somariwala here made the point about how there was an enormous amount of interest in the Commonwealth Games. There was. The interest fades not because the viewer out there loses interest in the Commonwealth Games, but because the viewer out there just moves on. He switches on television one day and does not see an athlete run. The 400 meters runners who won at the Asian Games were unknown figures in India. Unknown figures, completely unaware of, we as a sporting nation were completely unaware of who these people were. Why is that? That is because, as Tarun touched upon, and I want to elaborate on, is that televisions left the notion of old school sport behind. Until the time that sport in general, and I don't mean this just from the IPL perspective, jumps on the bandwagon and understands the relevance of television in the modern world, those sports will not grow. You please look at around the world, and managers and marketing people will be better off at this, but look at how the Olympics movement functions. Look at, for instance, how football functions. Harish threw some light on that. How does the EPL function? Harish mentioned the weekend programming. It is not just weekend programming, it's subscription money that drives football. Money paid by you and me sitting at home saying, I pay £120 a month, please let me watch Manchester United play every weekend. That's a model that sport administrators in India, as Tarun mentioned, that will have to look at very carefully. Because till the time that we build on the goodwill of sport in India, I want to make two examples here. One is hockey, a great sport in terms of interest in India. It still seems to touch a chord around the country. Yet it is perhaps the most shambolic administration that you can possibly associate with a sporting body. Why is that? I watched the World Cup, I don't know, I think some of you might have the World Cup in Delhi earlier on in the year. Or was it 2010? 2010, yes. The World Cup generates revenue, is of interest to a very curious and excited TV audience. It's followed by absolutely nothing. The sport has to be delivered to an audience by its administrators, by people with a great idea. And I'm sure there's many of you out here who are going to have to work on this. Why does football not work in India? One, of course, is because there is a there's high quality football available to us, and it seems kids around the country now want to wear Manchester United t-shirts and walk around. Also, does any of us know what network owns the rights to football in India? Does it? No, it does not. They were thrown out as broadcast partners 2 years ago, Z Sports. Since then, the rights are held by a company called 24 Ghanta, a Bengali channel that is seen in parts of Calcutta and probably just feeds into the curiosity of the average Bengali football fan, and I can't see it anywhere. I think the challenge, and I think this is the area where I can talk down to all of you as a journalist, because we are waiting for the next big idea to come from sports managers, from administrators of sport, and it's the converse that will work. The idea will never come from the television business or the news business, or in many cases the broadcaster. The IPL was an idea that worked when it wasn't expected to. It delivered a city-based loyalty which still exists. It might have faded, but it did not disappear from public memory in the last game, and I'm pretty sure that in the non-World Cup year the IPL will bounce back. The same will need to happen at perhaps not the same scale of $1 billion, but for events such as the ones Mr. Sumariwala mentioned, events such as athletics, events such as football, which cannot be played at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday. That's how the National Football League used to schedule its games. I'm not very sure how many people in this country have the time to switch on a television set to watch Mohan Bagan and Chirag United play at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Whoever's designing this is getting it wrong, and I think that's where, if any of you get into the design and administration of sport, we'll have to look at. You need to have solid broadcast partners. That's going to be the #1 challenge. And you need to have, obviously, to take Tarun's point further, you need to have dedicated commercial partners. But those commercial partners only come on board when they see value. It's a give and take game. I don't understand that equation. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know the left hand either. But it is, at the end of the day, a give and take game. I get the feeling that we are not a one-sport country in the true sense of the word. But we are a country that's averse to taking a risk with another sport. think that as time has passed, our capacity to take risk with another sport has actually lessened, and this is something that that corporate India will have to look at. But our risk, till the time that we as innovators of thought and of concepts are not going to be able to put Mr. Sumariwala's athletes on prime time television and make them sexy, till that time, this situation is going to persist. We'll have to look at also the success stories in Indian sport and how, unfortunately, they happen to be just individuals who emerge in spite of the system. So how do you design a badminton plan around Saina Nehwal? I think it needs some sort of genius to do that. Saina Nehwal hasn't played the National Badminton Championship for the last 7 years. If she hasn't, then why must ESPN go out there and put 7 cameras on that coverage when Saina Nehwal is not even going to show up? When they are much better off just sitting on top of a coverage that's being done by the producers of the All India Championships, putting it out there, and if you're interested, you can watch. Please understand, the production of sport is among the hardest and most expensive things to do in the world. And till the time that the producers of sport see return in that value, they will not do it. I think that the role of the news media, and I just want to end with this because at various seminars of this kind in the past, I've been subjected to some amount of vicious abuse on this. But the role of the news media is minimal. We are very happy to report good stories and we are very happy to report bad stories. Cricket provides us with a 60-40 percentage, unfortunately now. It used to be larger than that, but of late it has. But athletics provides us 20% happy stories and 80% negativity. Football provides us absolutely with nothing. I can't remember in the last 8 months having done an Indian football story which is other than Baichu Bhotia's retirement, and that's because we all seem to know him as that one icon of Indian football. The PHL was something that Tarun touched upon, and I wanted to look at that very carefully. I'm sure there is a great idea in Indian hockey. It was prime time television. It came into our households at 8 o'clock in the evening. It's less than a T20 game. We all acknowledge that sitting through a hockey match is extremely enjoyable. It experimented with, I thought, 15-minute quarters. I may be wrong, might be 20-minute quarters. Yet, it didn't take off. Why was that? Because Mr. Gill sat there and ruined it. Why didn't football take off in India? I remember being a young journalist in 1997, joining TWI, Transworld International, which picked up the rights for football in India. The Information and Broadcasting Ministry denied the right to uplink football live from India. It is not the fault of, how can it be laid at the door of the news media that they did not help in the promotion of football? The sport in India and its interest was killed off by the government of India. And I don't, am I finished with time? Or do I? No, he's keeping a very tight watch. I want to make one last point. I think that till the time that we understand that as a nation the engagement in sport is a gradual process, sometimes some sport, growing up, how many of us, and Harish and I certainly would agree with this, how many of us would have thought that an Indian girl would be among the top 5 in world badminton rankings? It was an unthinkable thought. Unthinkable. Just in the 80s, it was unimaginable. How many of us thought that? There is the basis in Indian sport to build something. It requires innovators, and it requires those innovators to think not necessarily just out of the box. It just requires them to think how a sport can be nurtured, not necessarily just to develop it, but also so it becomes a viable entertainment property. And I mean this in the truest sense of the word. If you're going to rely on old school methods, such as the one that Doordarshan employs, which is that it goes to court and it says that it is in national interest for me to cannibalize on the rights of a legitimate rights holder and broadcast cricket, then we are going to get nowhere. And so I think that there will come a time when, just like several businesses that people run, they only focus on 3 or 4 sports. There will come a time when 3 or 4 indigenous Indian sports, and I'm not sure about Gulli Danda, but 3 or 4 indigenous Indian sports will find a man with a big idea or an innovator with a big idea, and the circle will then be complete, where you will find a broadcast partner, where you will find the commercial interest, and I promise you that's when you'll find the news interest, because the news interest is actually a follow-up. It does not result in the enhanced interest in a sport. That's it.